Okay, I gotta admit, one of my favorite ideas is having two characters from the same anime grow up together, and honestly, I've probably done a couple of those videos, or just, in passing, maybe helped other people with those type of videos as well, but I realized I've never really done that with Tanjiro, and I was thinking, what would have happened if Tanjiro grew up with someone like Zenitsu? Someone that is a crybaby, someone that we know has a totally different life necessarily to Tanjiro. Tanjiro was basically raised in a totally different environment, and we would have to take quite a few liberties because there is no kind of way to make them grow up together in a simple term. And in this version, let's just say it's gonna be kind of sad. And I hate to say that because, we're about to get really kind of graphic, but don't worry, if you are not really a fan of that, I will be kind of faint on the idea. Now, for starters, we would not have the normal version of Tanjiro, or the normal kind of way of all the way building up to his family's passing. Well, a lot of these things would happen far earlier on, so Tanjiro would be at a far younger age. Now, with that said, he would be more or less kind of taken to the point that his whole family has now passed away, and his kind of sister, Nezuko, is actually became a demon. Now, with that said, now we're dealing with something a little bit different, a Tanjiro far younger, because, we are talking about growing up with somebody. So he has to be a good little bit younger, if that means 3 to about 5 years younger. That is kind of where I'm at right now. And with a demon sister, Nezuko. Now, Nezuko in this turn would have to be weaker, quite a bit weaker, so Tanjiro doesn't, pass away as well because of the attack. And we'll just make it this time around that we have a stumbling former Hashira, a former Thunder Hashira, actually showing up. Now, this former Thunder Hashira is actually someone that still trains and helps the youth. At the end of the day, we've seen that he massively helped, Zenitsu. So, this time around, he would not only take Tanjiro, but he would also take Nezuko, which would obviously be surprising, especially because normally someone would definitely not do something like this, because Nezuko is literally a demon. So, this time around, he actually would decide to, actually take him, and this would lead to some events that are actually quite a bit different. We know that Nezuko is obviously a demon, and that would come with its challenges, but there is arguments to be made that the Thunder Hashira, or former Thunder Hashira, I believe his name is pronounced Jigoro, and if I'm wrong about that, I apologize. I believe it's Jigoro or Jigoro or something like that, and he's basically would play the Kodaki piece, but now he has 3 students, and that would be Zenitsu, Tanjiro, and also Kaigaku, which we know Kaigaku, the eventual turn of Kaigaku. But here's the thing. This is a little bit different, because Tanjiro has such an effect on people. He's going to have an effect on both Zenitsu and Kaigaku. At the end of the day, he affects Zenitsu, Inosuke, and a bunch of people in his later life. So when he begins to train actually in the art of thunder breathing, which we will get to the importance of that very soon, but once he begins training in that, he would actually build a relationship with both Kaigaku and Zenitsu at the same time. Kaigaku was pretty damn strong. There is no kind of avoiding the idea that Kaigaku was very skilled, but he had more or less a darker side to him, because at the end of the day, he wasn't getting the attention that Zenitsu was. But with Tanjiro there, he could easily tell Kaigaku that the reason for the attention is that Zenitsu needs a lot more help. And yes, they all have potential. Kaigaku, in fact, does as well. And Kaigaku, honestly, would beat more or less all of them in swordsmanship very early on. And Tanjiro would reassure him that he needs to understand that his time is coming and that his kind of isolation or his way of training in an isolated area is kind of a show of respect, and that it's a show of respect by Jigoro. Because at the end of the day, he understands that Kaigaku has extreme talent and that he can continue to work and hone his skills on his own, especially when executing the mass amount of thunder breathing styles. But we all know that Zenitsu would continue to sharpen the tools of that one breathing style, the very first form, Thunderclap and Flash, and that's still the only thing he'll actually be able to do, because there's truly no point in changing that at all. Now, in terms of the training with Tanjiro, let's talk about what thunder breathing would do for him. Now, for starters, we understand that Tanjiro's Nichiren blade would still come out to be a black blade. Now, this would mean that he has practically no connection to any one breathing style, so it would benefit him to learn thunder breathing. Honestly, there's an argument to be made that him learning thunder breathing might even be more beneficial than him learning water breathing in the first place. I honestly think the skills and also the techniques that thunder breathing actually shows, especially because Tanjiro in the later version or the later of the story of the manga actually utilizes thunder breathing itself, or at least a form of it, to make him go extremely quick, that being of Godspeed, or the form of Godspeed. Now, this would be beneficial to him because, well, later on he's going to see mass benefits, but I'm going to hold off on that so I don't go too far ahead of myself. But I just want to say that initially, because Tanjiro would be able to learn basically all the techniques very similar to Kaigaku, and be able to convince Kaigaku and Zenitsu that they are all brothers. At the end of the day, they are more or less being raised together, so they're able to more or less stick together and take on whatever is to come next. Now, for those who don't really know the manga, and I want to bring this up, this is kind of a channel based around manga nowadays, because I do exceedingly go into the manga, especially with Demon Slayer What Ifs. But I want to bring up the fact that this would massively affect Kaigaku, and most of you already know why, but I'll hold off on that as we go along into the story. But I want to talk about that just briefly because it would massively affect him, because inherently we would now have Kaigaku, we would have Zenitsu, and Tanjiro actually be able to be Demon Slayers together. Now, if all three of them go to the, obviously, normal final selection, Zenitsu would still kind of be, I hate to say this, but useless. He would 100% be kind of useless. Now, he would get kind of help from Tanjiro and Kaigaku, obviously, but Tanjiro would more or less try to break him out of that shell a little bit earlier and maybe help him find that state of basically sleep that would allow him to fight more efficiently. But right now, it just doesn't work, because at the end of the day, I mean, Zenitsu is still very, very fearful of demons and everything around, so he would struggle massively, at least in that regard. Now, leading to the final selection and basically taking on all the demons and the hand demon, Kaigaku and Tanjiro in sync would be pretty darn strong. I mean, two Thunder Breather users, their speed is extremely fast, and that's a big thing about Thunder Breathing, how fast you truly are. And Kaigaku would definitely feel those effects, and even his struggles, and the struggles basically we've seen in the manga because of Kaigaku, the fact that he actually couldn't learn the very first form of thunder breathing, but he could actually learn all the rest. Well, this would be probably and most likely massively different. Now, that's the case, and only reason why I bring it up is because of Tanjiro himself. Yes, I know that Kaigaku in the original actually can't use Thunderclap and Flash, but with, obviously, Tanjiro himself there's a good chance that Kaigaku can at least learn the basics of it and wouldn't feel as threatened by Zenitsu, just for the most part, at least to a larger extent. And Tanjiro would continue helping him throughout this entire time, and they'd be able to slice through this entire final selection with relative ease, and would more or less be able to head back to the basically old thunder breathing Hashira, or basically their father figure, not too long after that. Tanjiro and Zenitsu and Kaigaku would then begin to set off on missions. Now, this is where things might change just a little bit. Unfortunately, they most likely wouldn't be able to stick together the entire time. And maybe even Kaigaku would see fit that he wants to go off on his own. But any way you spin it, it's not really that big of a deal. Kaigaku would, of course, still be somewhat respectful, especially because of Tanjiro. But other than that, he might see fit that he believes he can go handle things on his own and go defeat demons on his own. So I think that would be kind of the canon version, in my opinion, of Kaigaku. So Tanjiro and Zenitsu would still be together, but Kaigaku would decide that he wants to go off on his own, thinking that he can go handle his business elsewhere. Tanjiro saying that it would probably be better if they stick together, but Kaigaku says that he needs to go challenge himself to make sure that he can strive to be stronger and even better than Tanjiro in the near future, which is kind of that competitive and want and hunger for power that Kaigaku would still maintain, but just a more respectful version of it. Now, this would lead to more or less the simple fights that you would think of. I mean, he would still, or Tanjiro would still have Nezuko, but also would have Zenitsu by the side, or by his side. Zenitsu still being as weird as he always is about Tanjiro's sister, even though Tanjiro's sister is looking a little bit younger than she would normally look, even though demons, I know, can grow and basically get bigger and so on, but it would be kind of an awkward thing, especially because Tanjiro would say that Nezuko basically has not aged, at least in terms of the way she's looked since she turned into a demon all those years ago. And Zenitsu would then feel very awkward about that, and Tanjiro would then reference that, well, Zenitsu is basically like his adopted brother, so that's literally his adopted sister, aka his sister. And then Zenitsu would feel even more uncomfortable about them talking about this, and they would stop talking about it. Now, with that said, the first demon they would face, and they would face it together, would be the Swamp Demon. The Swamp Demon would be made quick work. I mean, this would not be a fair fight. The whole point of the Swamp Demon is, and to overcome him, was kind of like his portable ability, and basically be able to pop out of different places and his duplication and stuff like that. But with his high intensity of speed, and hopefully with Zenitsu's help, but even if he doesn't help, it would be very easy for Tanjiro to actually slice through this first demon. And it's not even that he's more prepared in this version, it's that he just, in my opinion, would have a breathing style that would be just more comparable to this moment. And I think it's been very apparent when you have actual training partners, especially training partners in or around your own age, and that can actually help you, you're gonna find way bigger benefits. I mean, he had Kaigaku and Zenitsu, even though, Zenitsu isn't the smartest, person in the world, or the sharpest tool in the shed, but still, you have 3 or 2 overall partners to actually help you get stronger. So the Swamp Demon would be basically made quick work of, and this would lead to basically the Azukaza or the Asukuza arc. I always get that. I don't know. Let me know in the comment section. I think I talked about this in the last video too. These are pre-recorded, so let me know in the last. I know the last video I talked about that, but basically the city that never sleeps, and they go investigate where Muzan currently is, or eventually they'd find out Muzan is there. Now, of course, Muzan would not fight, and Muzan would actually most likely not be fearful of Tanjiro overall, or even kind of get flashbacks. I mean, yes, Tanjiro would most likely still have the scar that looks like a Demon Slayer mark, but here's the issue. He doesn't have the earrings. I mean, the earrings were a big thing, so there's a good chance that Muzan doesn't even recognize Tanjiro as, like, Yorichi, and there's also a good chance that, well, they don't even they don't send any demons after him. Now, even if they do, I can see a 2v2, as long as Zenitsu actually fights, going pretty heavily in favor of Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Nezuko. And then obviously you would have the help of Lady Tamayao and also Yushiro. So the fight would be a pretty easy one, far easier than the one in canon. but I don't even see the fight happening because there's a good chance that Muzan just leaves. I mean, Muzan really sent those demons after him because he saw Yorichi within the kid, and he basically was annoyed at the fact that he was wearing those earrings. So if he just like shows up and basically is like, oh, I know who you are, and basically talks to Muzan in a weird way, just like how he did in normal, there's just no way the first encounter would lead to Muzan basically sending demons after him. There's actually a good chance that Muzan just straight up leaves, ignores Tanjiro, and Tanjiro is actually left questioning if that even was the person. Like, straight up questioning if that actually was Muzan, but of course he would learn later that it definitely was. Now, the conversation with Lady Tamayao and Yushiro would be pretty simple, and I could see Zenitsu probably fawning over Lady Tamayao to a certain extent, and Yushiro getting pretty mad about that, especially because coming from Zenitsu. But they learned that they can get basically blood from the 12 Kizuki, and as long as they can store up that blood and send it off to her, it's a pretty easy go around and a pretty easy way of basically trying to research a cure for the demons. Now, all of that is pretty standard, and of course we would skip the first meeting with Zenitsu because he already has met him, and the mansion part of this scenario would be about the same. At this point, Tanjiro was pretty skilled and was pretty just skillfully ahead. And with the abilities of Thunder Breathing and the speed differential between him and Kyogai, I can actually see Tanjiro benefiting from the fight or basically having more benefits in this fight, at least to an extent. But overall, the same result would definitely happen, especially with Zenitsu closer at hand. I think Zenitsu would be probably a good bit stronger in this version of him. So he's a little bit more confident, maybe a little bit more serious and more willing to actually slay demons because he's been raised around Tanjiro and Kaigaku at the same time. So he's gotten kind of like the more older brother feel, kind of tough love, but then from Tanjiro you get a little bit of the softness and the comfortableness and stuff like that. And I could see him being a lot more beneficial in these early fights, especially because of all those things I just said. Now, Inosuke showing up, that doesn't change. Inosuke would get his lick in, of course, and Zenitsu would 100% protect Nezuko's box, probably even more aggressively at this time around. He probably wouldn't just cover it up and hide and try to help. No, they'd probably get to jump in and probably actually put the hands on Inosuke. And now, would Zenitsu be very good at throwing hands? Probably not. So it probably wouldn't go super well. But luckily enough, there's obviously benefit to what they're doing. And they're able to defend the box. And then they will meet a new person in Inosuke. And I just want to skip to this one part. I want to skip mostly to the encounter with Rui, because most of these things are going to be pretty basic in terms of more or less what occurs. Now, the spider demon that Zenitsu fights, the sun spider demon, is going to be slayed a lot quicker. Honestly, he might not even get poisoned because of how much stronger Zenitsu actually is in this regard. On top of that, Tanjiro and Inosuke would actually be able to slice through most of these demons that are here, and the mother spider demon would be unfortunately put down a little bit more rough, you could say. I know in the original canon it's basically she's slain in a very peaceful way, but this time around, unfortunately, Tanjiro is not equipped with that and would slice her neck off pretty, brutally, and as sad as that is. But you know how compassionate Tanjiro could be. But that's beyond the point. Now, the real thing to talk about is the fight with Rui. Now, this is when Tanjiro normally awakens sun breathing for the very first time, having that very, 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 very in-depth flashback of his father dancing. The whole dance sequence and, the epic music cues in. Love that scene. But this is a little different. He does use the principles of, well, we know, water breathing, but this time he would use the principles of thunder breathing, making him far quicker, far more lethal, and far basically quicker to the punch. So when he would go to strike in, he would basically use the principles of thunderclap and flash mixed with the Himokimi Kagura and be able to slice through the neck of Rui quicker than Rui can cut off his own neck. And this would be the very start of how much different this is going to feel for Tanjiro. His in-depth usage of thunder breathing mixed with sun breathing now is going to be insane. And it's going to make him far stronger, especially when the utilization of thunder breathing, thunderclap and flash Godspeed, or Godspeed, the first form, is actually going to be utilized. And Godspeed is, I know, a little bit different, but it's basically the first form just completely juiced up like crazy. And this would be the more or less the start of how much thunder breathing is going to affect, because once they're out of this scenario, they go back to the Hashira mansion for rehabilitation training and stuff like that, and they go through the whole sequence of stabbing Nezuko and all that. None of that really matters. This is when they finally meet up with Kaigaku once again and actually have a bit of a spar. Kaigaku would soon realize that Tanjiro has and his skills have awakened even further. Same thing with Zenitsu, and this would basically go one of two ways. I mean, this could be the turning point that forces him into demonhood eventually, or it could be the turning point of him having the motivation through Tanjiro and Zenitsu to get stronger. Maybe he does need to team up with these people so that he can continue on and get stronger together. And that's where I think, and personally, where I see things going. I see things going, well, in that direction of Kaigaku actually staying around with them. Now, with the Mugen Train and stuff like that, now against Akaza and people like that, it wouldn't, or things would actually change to an extent. And only reason why I bring that up, in a fight it wouldn't, but the fight most likely wouldn't even happen, because Muzan would not recognize Tanjiro necessarily as a threat, quote unquote. And even if he does decide to show up, I mean, let's just say they have and stand a little bit better of a chance against Akaza. But overall, I mean, the best that would happen is Rengoku living. But I don't think Akaza would even show up, making the Enmu fight a very simple one, and Rengoku actually being able to more or less live, which is fantastic. Now, going into the Entertainment District arc, I mean, everything from here on is just quite a bit easier, because you're adding Kaigaku into the fray, someone who's going to continuously get stronger and better alongside Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Zenitsu. So all of these fights with an extra person, an extra user of thunder breathing, it would be pretty beneficial. And that might even be an understatement. It might be really beneficial. So it's kind of like you turn a group of 3 into a group of 4, and now Tanjiro has an extra person who's very efficient in thunder breathing and very strong in his own right, continuously fighting and helping everyone out. So I'm actually going to more talk about what would change in the Infinity Castle arc. We all know that now Kaigaku does not exist, so it's safe to say that there's going to be another demon replacement. Now, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, I know exactly what demon replacement is going to be, because I don't. I honestly have no clue who would that necessarily be, especially if a lot of those demons that are normally killed are still killed. Now, Zenitsu, if not fighting a Kaigaku that is a demon, he would now actually be able to help out with anybody else. Literally could join the fight with someone like Doma, maybe join the fight with Kokushibo, and actually be able to use his god speed to more or less help with that fight as well. And that includes someone like Kaigaku, maybe adding an extra person, going Kaigaku, Tomioka, and Tanjiro against Akaza, making it so that these fights are a lot more beneficial and a lot more in favor of everyone else. And I want to say this would lead to Muzan's defeat, just like the normal story. I mean, there is really no negatives necessarily, but I want to talk about this before I sum everything up and before this video ends. The one negative that could possibly happen is Kaigaku actually gaining a ton of strength from this time with Tanjiro and Zenitsu and the former Thunder Hashira, and eventually deciding that he's still going to become a demon. Because if he still becomes a demon, and he's more efficient in thunder breathing, stronger in the breathing styles, and actually just flat out better, there's a good chance that Zenitsu would lose to this version of Kaigaku. Now, I don't think that would happen, just because that would mean literally Tanjiro didn't have an effect on this person, and we've seen with our eyes that Tanjiro has affected every last person he's ever been around, especially if they're just a normal human being. And he's even affected demons themselves. I mean, this guy has crazy charisma, and I'm sure people are going to talk about that in the comment section, but he has crazy charisma, and I swear he rolls nat 20s every single time. And Tanjiro would have that massive effect, obviously, on the one and only Kaigaku. So I just don't see that happening and him becoming a demon. But I would love to hear what you guys have to say. What would have happened if Tanjiro and Zenitsu actually grew up together? Do you think it would have went a different way? Do you think Tanjiro would have been weaker with thunder breathing? Shoot, do you think he wouldn't even have been able to learn thunder breathing? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Maybe you have some more insight than I do on this idea. Nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like, leave a comment down below, leave a sub. We are growing every day, so join the community, join the army, and yeah, that's all I gotta say. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and I hope all y'all have an amazing day. Later.